Imagine marrying into a world of old money and influence, only to discover it's all a gilded cage built on lies. My husband offered me a future, but what he really wanted was my past, my present, and everything I had ever worked for. He asked me to trust him, with a pen in his hand and a contract on the table designed to steal my entire life. He never suspected that my own plan was already in motion, and the guest I had invited would bring his entire world crashing down. "You trust me, babe," he whispered, as a contract that would steal my entire fortune was slid across the table. They saw me as a stepping stone, a solution to their secret financial ruin. What they failed to realize was that while they were setting a trap, I was building a cage. This is not a story of a victim. It is the story of a meticulously planned takedown, and it began the moment my lawyer walked through the door. My story with Oliver began 6 years ago in Chicago. At the time, I was in my late 20s, completely immersed in my career, and had worked tirelessly to achieve my position. Real estate was my domain. I flipped houses, made intelligent investments, and had constructed a comfortable life for myself. It was not ostentatious, but it was solid and secure. Oliver, by contrast, projected every sign of having come from wealth, or at least that is what I believed. He possessed the poise, the self-assurance, and the refined tastes of the affluent. He never spoke explicitly about money, yet he was always dressed in the finest suits, showcased the latest gadgets, and indulged in high-end everything. His parents, Thomas and Victoria, were carved from the same material. They carried themselves with an old money posture, as if they were inherently superior to everyone else. Their home was immense, filled with antique furnishings and grand ancestral portraits, creating an image of immense wealth at every turn. But I was not some naive, starstruck woman. I had met and worked with wealthy people constantly. Still, something about Oliver's family felt off. Thomas and Victoria would make casual comments like, "You're so fortunate to be joining our family," and "A woman like you must be overjoyed by the security we can offer." I should have questioned their assumption that I was desperate for stability. Oliver himself would occasionally trigger alarm bells. He would borrow money and then conveniently forget to repay it. On one occasion, he suggested I put my name on a property he wanted to buy, claiming it was for tax purposes, a suggestion I shut down immediately. Despite this, I pushed these warning signs aside, convincing myself they were insignificant until the night they made their move. Oliver and I had been married for 2 years when his parents invited us for dinner at their estate. This was not unusual, as they relished extravagant family gatherings with expensive wine and endless talk of legacy. But that evening, the atmosphere was different. A palpable tension hung in the air from the moment we arrived. Oliver seemed animated, his mother was glowing with anticipation, and his father, usually impassive, wore a look of satisfaction. Midway through the meal, Thomas cleared his throat and produced a stack of papers, placing it before me like a trophy. "We've been thinking about the future," Victoria said, her tone warm and almost motherly. "About what's best for our family." I glanced at Oliver, who was watching my reaction intently. "We need to guarantee stability," Thomas added, pushing a pen towards me. "This contract allows us to pool our resources, creating one united financial entity." I picked up the first page and scanned its contents. They wanted me to transfer everything, my savings, investments, real estate assets, and even my personal checking accounts, into a family trust that would be squarely under their control. A knot formed in my stomach. "It's just a formality, babe," Oliver said smoothly, as if this were the most normal request in the world. He flashed a confident smile. "You trust me, don't you?" Something inside me snapped. I leaned back, took a calming breath, and smiled. "Then you'll love what's in my safe deposit box." A silence fell over the room. Oliver's grin faltered. Victoria's knuckles whitened around her wine glass. Thomas's jaw clenched. Their collective arrogance began to crumble. They had counted on my shock, perhaps even my flattery, but they hadn't expected defiance. "What's in the box?" Oliver asked, his voice tight. "Oh, just some paperwork," I replied casually. "Certain documents. A little something I prepared for protection before we got married." The stillness grew dense. Then, as if on cue, the butler entered. "Ma'am," he said, "your lawyer is here." I wish I could have captured their expressions. Oliver turned pale, Victoria looked as if she'd been forced to swallow a lemon, and Thomas simply stared, his grip tightening on the contract. A moment later, my lawyer, Helen, walked in. "Good evening," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. "I'm told there's a contract my client is supposed to sign." Victoria was the first to recover. "This is a private family matter," she snapped. Helen ignored her, flipping through the pages and skimming each section before letting out a small laugh. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "This is nothing short of blatant financial manipulation." Oliver shifted uncomfortably. "It's not like that," he started, but Helen cut him off. "Actually, it is," she said firmly, looking at me. "If you signed this, they'd have total authority over your holdings. They could drain your accounts, sell your properties, and you'd be powerless." Victoria's face flushed. "It's about trust," she argued, her tone sickly sweet. "Right," Helen replied flatly. "That would explain why the contract gives them full withdrawal rights and the power to make every major financial decision, while my client can't access her own money without their blessing." She smiled at me. "Riley, it's fortunate you have a lawyer who reads the fine print." Oliver stood abruptly. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, looking me in the eye. "Why am I doing this?" I repeated, my voice calm but laced with disbelief. "You just tried to rob me of everything." Victoria's voice adopted a cloying sweetness. "Honey, this is just a misunderstanding." "No," I said coolly. "It isn't." I rose from my seat and exhaled slowly. "I'm done here." As I stood to leave, Oliver clamped a hand around my wrist, his smirk replaced by an icy stare. "Don't do this," he hissed. "You don't want to make enemies in this family." "Enemies?" I repeated, yanking my hand free. "That's exactly what you've made me." Victoria abruptly shifted tactics, letting out a shaky laugh like a soap opera star. "Darling, you're blowing this out of proportion. This is all just a big mix-up. We only wanted to keep you safe." "Safe from what, exactly?" I asked myself. Helen folded her arms. "If that were true, why structure the trust so my client had no control over her own money?" Thomas sighed audibly. "This has become unnecessary. Let's proceed like adults." I nearly laughed. "Like adults who try to swindle their own family?" His expression darkened, but their desperation was now plain. They had badly underestimated me. That's when Victoria dropped her next bombshell. "I suppose," she began with an exasperated sigh, "this means you have no interest in the inheritance either." My head swiveled toward her. Inheritance. Oliver shot his mother a warning look, but she pressed on. "Oh." Did Oliver neglect to mention his grandfather's estate in Rhode Island? The true family fortune. Helen and I both realized the same thing. Their scheme wasn't just about my finances. "The estate is in probate," Victoria continued, "but if you're going to be so difficult." She was toying with me, dangling a carrot. All I saw was a family skilled in taking what never belonged to them. I turned to Oliver. "Were you ever going to say anything?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I was waiting for the right time." "Better for who?" I asked. He said nothing because we both knew the truth. We left that night without a goodbye. In the car, Helen sighed. "You realize what's happening, don't you? They're not just after your money." I stared out the window. "What do you think the odds are that Oliver's in debt?" Helen gave me a pointed glance. "You believe he's hiding something?" "I'm sure of it," I replied. "The flashy lifestyle, the designer clothes, the bragging about money while rarely paying his own bills. It was his Hail Mary." The next morning, I hired a private investigator. The report was even worse than I'd imagined. Oliver was in massive debt, with maxed out credit cards, personal loans, and even a business loan he had secretly taken out in my name. I confronted him that evening. "How long have you been stealing from me?" He blinked. "What are you talking about?" I threw the evidence at him. "You took out a loan in my name. You've been drowning in debt, and you expected me to sign over everything so you could fix your problems." For once, he didn't deny it. Instead, he laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You were always so careful," he sneered. "I thought eventually you'd understand the bigger picture, but you just don't get it, do you?" "So, you planned this all along?" "You have no idea what you've started," he said, his face inscrutable. "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice steady. He just gave me one cold glare, grabbed his coat, and slammed the door. By morning, my phone buzzed. It was Helen. "You need to come to my office immediately." When I arrived, a file was on her desk. I flipped it open and my stomach dropped. There was another woman. Actually, there were two, Simone and Nicole. "Oliver was lying about a lot more than money," Helen said quietly, pointing to photos of two breathtakingly beautiful women, both younger than me. "Simone was with him 2 years ago," she explained. "He promised her an engagement, took out a loan in her name, emptied her savings, then vanished." I felt sick. "And Nicole?" Helen shook her head sadly. "Nicole was last year's target. He's still involved with her. Engaged, in fact. He proposed to Nicole and told her they'd be married in 6 weeks. My husband was a married man, betrothed to someone else. Then I realized the Rhode Island inheritance his parents were fixated on likely required him to be married to unlock it. This wasn't just about siphoning off my money. It was part of a larger, twisted plan. I knew I had to speak to Nicole. Helen arranged a discreet meeting. The moment Nicole arrived, radiating naive happiness about her upcoming marriage, I felt a pang of sympathy. As soon as I said Oliver's name, her eyes flashed with suspicion. "How do you know him?" she asked warily. "Because," I said, laying my wedding band on the table, "he's my husband." Her shock was visceral. She struggled to keep calm as her trembling fingers retrieved her own engagement ring, placing it next to mine. 2 identical rings. Tears spilled down her face as she recounted her story. Oliver had told her about a forthcoming inheritance he could only receive if he were married. He had already convinced her to hand over her savings. My hands balled into fists. "He's taking me to meet his parents this weekend," she nodded. "Perfect," I exhaled. "Let's disrupt that little gathering." Nicole agreed to play along. Meanwhile, a forensic accountant uncovered an offshore account tied to Oliver, and I investigated his parents. The Rhode Island property was tied up in a tangled probate process. They needed a stable heir with a valid marriage, Oliver, to gain control. I now had the ammunition to destroy their entire operation. The evening of the grand family dinner arrived. Oliver believed he was introducing his darling, unknowing fiancé to his parents. Instead, Nicole and I arrived together. I walked in first. Victoria's expression soured. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "You really think I'd miss a family affair?" I replied serenely. Right on cue, Oliver stepped in with Nicole on his arm. He froze, the color draining from his face as he saw me standing next to her. I watched the panic flicker in his eyes. "Babe," he said to Nicole, struggling for composure. "Why is she here?" Nicole crossed her arms. "You tell me."
Victoria stude Bradley.
"This is absurd." I chuckled. "Oh, I think you should pay very close attention." I glanced toward Helen, who stood by the doorway. "Would you like to begin?" Helen stepped forward, opening a folder. "Let's start with the fraud," she declared. "Then we'll get to the matter of bigamy." The room erupted. Thomas slammed his glass, so hard that wine splashed everywhere. Nicole hurled her engagement ring at Oliver, and he just stared, brimming with hatred in my direction. "Fraud," Victoria spat. "Where did you find these absurd accusations?" Helen calmly laid a thick file on the table. "The evidence is all here. Bank statements, forged signatures, and proof that Oliver secured a business loan using his wife's name without her consent. That alone is a felony. It stopped being family business the second you tried to rob me," I said firmly. "Now it's a legal matter." Nicole chimed in, her voice trembling with anger. "And what about the bigamy, Oliver? Last I checked, I was engaged to a single man." Oliver slowly rose, eyes darting around. "Yes, I was involved with you while still technically married," he admitted. "But my marriage to her was done." I let out a derisive snort. "You were so done with me you tried to maneuver me into signing away my entire net worth." He exploded. "You think you've won? You act innocent, but you've loved holding the purse strings, making me come begging for money. Funny way of describing me safeguarding my finances from a chronic liar," I countered. "I was your husband," he yelled. "You were supposed to stand by me." "Sit down," Thomas demanded in a low, commanding tone. Oliver eventually complied. Helen cleared her throat. "Nicole has already reported the money you swindled from her. That's one fraud charge. The forged signatures for the business loan have also been reported. That's another criminal charge. You involved the police?" Victoria gasped. I nodded, my eyes on Oliver. Helen continued, unaffected. Third, about that Rhode Island estate. The probate court knows more than you realize about your family's extensive debt. Your assets are frozen. A stunned hush enveloped the table. Victoria rocketed to her feet. Lies, she screamed, but her shaking voice betrayed her. She whirled on Oliver. You fool. All you had to do was secure this arrangement. Don't pin this solely on me, he spat back. This was your plan, too. I want him in handcuffs, Nicole declared. Don't worry, I told her. It's happening. Oliver whipped his head around. You wouldn't. I met his gaze without flinching. Watch me. And that's when sirens flared outside. Oliver was taken away that night, charged with fraud, identity theft, and bigamy. Plenty to keep him behind bars. His parents' precious estate fell into foreclosure within months. Nicole and I met for drinks the following day, clinking our glasses to celebrate. Some people say revenge is pointless, but for us, putting them all on blast was absolutely worth it. Because sometimes when people try to crush you, the most satisfying victory is to make sure their downfall is even greater.